What's going on? It's Fight Season MMA, and today I want to rank the men's divisions in order of how exciting they are to watch them fight. I am such a big UFC fan, I wouldn't be making content if I wasn't, and I wanted to rank, in my own opinion, keep that in mind, of how exciting the divisions are to watch them fight. So let's get right into the video, and if you enjoy the video, please leave a like, comment, and subscribe, and let's get right into it. Okay, so the first division I want to start with is heavyweight, and I think that this is going to be a unanimous number 8 for everyone. Heavyweight has got some amazing fighters like Tom Aspinall, Cyril Gane, John Jones, Sergey Pavlovich, Alexander Volkov that everyone loves to watch, but there's a bunch of fighters like Jailton Almeida, Alexander Romanov, who just fought, Marcin Tybura. I love Tai Tuivasa as a personality, but he has no skill whatsoever. That is the division of blobs. The amount of good heavyweights in comparison to featherweights or bantamweights is just absolutely alarming. There's probably about 5 or 6 notable heavyweights that are genuinely skillful within the division. I know everyone loves Derek Lewis taking his pants off, but how skillful is Derek Lewis besides that just unworldly power that he possesses, which makes Derek Lewis so special? Now, ultimately, not saying that there hasn't ever been a good fight in heavyweight. You look at Tom Aspinall versus Sergey Pavlovich at UFC 295. That was an amazing fight. And you got some other fights which are incredibly fun to watch. But ultimately, this is going to be my lowest ranking considering that there is so many other better divisions to watch. Okay, my next division that we have up here is welterweight. And people might be surprised by this ranking at number 7 for welterweight. But compared to some of the other divisions, it is one of the weaker divisions in the UFC. I know we got people like Shavkat Rakhmonov, Kamaru Usman, but you look at this last title fight versus Leon Edwards and this upcoming one with Leon Edwards versus Bilal Muhammad is an absolute sleep fest. You look at Leon Edwards versus Colby Covington, an absolute sleep fest of a fight to watch. There was so much buildup, and I was so excited to watch that fight, but ultimately that fight lived up to none of the hype because Colby Covington forgot how to fight. You got some other people within that division. Jack Della Maddalena might not be the most exciting fighter to watch, even though I really enjoy Jack Della Maddalena. But ultimately, the ranking here doesn't come in that the division isn't exciting to watch, but rather there are other divisions that I would prefer watching. Okay, at number 6, I have middleweight. And middleweight is one of the weirdest divisions within the UFC. It was very grappling heavy in the past, but now I'm seeing it leading towards striking. And ultimately, you got people like Khamzat Chimaev, who just pulled out of his fight with Robert Whittaker. You got Robert Whittaker. You got Jared Cannonier, Nasruddin Imavov, Roman Dolidze, a bunch, Sean Strickland, Israel Adesanya, Dricus du Plessis. But I don't know how fun middleweight is considering the other divisions within the UFC. Middleweight is one of the odd divisions to where you're starting to get a really powerful and losing skill. Sean Strickland is one of the best fighters to watch in the UFC off sheer skill he possesses. But how fun is Sean Strickland? Like that fight versus Dricus du Plessis was a very fun fight to watch, considering Sean Strickland was moving forward and he was being aggressive. But you look at that fight with Jared Cannonier that Sean Strickland had. That I love Jared Cannonier, and that fight was kind of boring. And this recent fight with Paulo Costa that he just had. So there isn't a full, every single fight that you can make in middleweight isn't a banger. There was going to be some bangers. You look at this new title fight with Israel Adesanya and Dricus du Plessis, there's going to be tension there, and this is going to be a banger. But ultimately, middleweight has to come in at number 6. Okay, at number 5, we got flyweight, and people might be thinking, how is flyweight at number 5? But flyweight is probably the most skilled division within the UFC. Flyweight just isn't that deep. You have names like Brandon Moreno, Alexandre Pantoja, Brendan Royval, Matthias Nicolau, now Tassora Taira, and a bunch of different other names going into this division. And every single flyweight fight that you get is some of the most fun UFC moments that you can imagine. And that is ultimately why I have them this high. Now, they couldn't make it any higher because the depth of the flyweight division isn't really there. One of my favorite fighters within the UFC is Manel Kape. Even though he has some out the octagon issues like making weight and stuff like that, his fight with Felipe dos Santos at UFC 293 was truly fun to watch. And he is a versatile and ultimately incredible mixed martial artist, but that's because his skill at flyweight is something that transfers within the octagon. Flyweight is super fun to watch. If you don't like flyweight just because they're small, I think I really highly recommend you go watch flyweight, but ultimately it can't be higher than some of the other divisions on the list. Okay, the next division, which you might think is crazy, is light heavyweight. And light heavyweight, when I got into the UFC, I was not a massive light heavyweight fan. But the addition of Alex Pereira and getting to know Yuri Prohaska and getting to know Jamal Hill and getting to see Khalil Roundtree and being able to see some Anthony Smith and something like that and some Victor Petrino when he was going and cruising up prior to the Anthony Smith fight. Light heavyweight is one of the most technical divisions in the UFC at the top. I'm not going to say all the way through because you've got Alex Pereira. Even though Yuri Prohaska is absolutely weird within the octagon, he is incredibly technical, and we all know that considering his being a former champion. Now, light heavyweight has produced some of the better fights within the past couple years. Look at, sadly, Glover Teixeira is retired, but Yuri Prohaska versus Glover Teixeira was possibly one of the best fights, one of the best fight that the UFC has ever seen within the octagon. You might call me crazy for saying that, but if you have not seen that fight, UFC 275, go back and watch that fight. This fight with, UFC 300, where Yuri and Alex fought on the card. Alex versus Jamal had one of the craziest knockouts that you could ever imagine. And then all of a sudden, you look at Yuri Prohaska absolutely coming back from the dead to beat Alexander Rakic. I think like a light heavyweight is an incredibly slept-on division, and I think with the star power of Alex Pereira, Yuri Prohaska, Magomed Ankalaev, even though he might not be the most exciting fighter, Johnny Walker might be there, and all these people who are knockout artists but also contain skill is the reason why I enjoy the light heavyweight division so much. Okay, at number 3, I got featherweight, and we're starting to get into the really skilled divisions within the UFC. This might be the hardest division in the UFC to become good at. You got a champion, or you got a former champion, Alexander Volkanovski, who reigned for so long, and he just got absolutely KO'd by Ilia Topuria. You have Max Holloway at the top, Yair Rodriguez, Brian Ortega, Diego Lopez rising up the ranks. You have so many different people within the UFC featherweight division who could be champion if there wasn't other people there. Yes, that's something to say about every division, but everyone within the UFC featherweight division possesses a skill set that is elite at the top, and that is something that a lot of other divisions don't have. I love watching the featherweights fight. I was so excited to see Ilia Topuria versus Alexander Volkanovski because I knew that this would be a chess match, and ultimately, I really, really, really understand how deep the featherweight division is and of how good each individual fighter's skill set is, and of how it's truly a styles make fights part in the UFC featherweight division. At number 2, I'm going to have the bantamweights come in here. The bantamweight division is so fun. The bantamweight division might be my favorite division inside the UFC. Champion Sean O'Malley isn't a grappler, is an incredible striker. You have people like Corey Sandhagen are up at the division, who I think is one of the most skilled and underrated fighters in the UFC currently. You have people like Merab Dvalishvili, who might not be the most exciting people in the octagon, but you look at his personality outside the octagon is absolutely insane. He just threw Henry Cejudo at UFC 298. You have people like Umar Nurmagomedov rising up the rankings. You have Chito Vera, who's a knockout artist. You have people like Rob Font, who you might not think is the most exciting, but is truly exciting going into this. Song Yadong is an incredible fighter. And ultimately, the bantamweight division is going to be in good hands for years to come. Sean O'Malley has a long road ahead of him. Behind featherweight, this might be the toughest division in the UFC, and it could be over featherweight, the toughest division in the UFC. Like I said, just about featherweight, every single person within the UFC possesses a different skill set that is elite. You look at Chito Vera, his power and chin, Sean O'Malley striking, Peter Yan striking, and well-roundedness, Song Yadong striking and timing and power. You have Corey Sandhagen's just absolute well-rounded ability, Merab Dvalishvili's wrestling, Henry Cejudo's wrestling, and there's so many different fights to make in that division that ultimately are some of the most fun fights in the UFC currently. And for number 1, I don't know if this is a surprise to anyone, but I'm going to have lightweight. Lightweight, with the fighters within lightweight, it just seems that you cannot have a bad fight in that division. Islam versus Poirier lived up to all the hype within the lightweight division. And then all I have to say is UFC 300. You look at the 2 lightweight fights that were on that card, Max Holloway versus Justin Gaethje. And I know Max Holloway is a featherweight who came up, but Justin Gaethje is one of the most exciting fighters in the UFC. And as you know the saying, Justin Gaethje is your favorite fighter's favorite fighter. Charles Oliveira versus Arman Tsarukyan was one of the closest fights on UFC 300, but lived up to all the hype. When Charles Oliveira jumped guillotine early in that first round and Arman Tsarukyan was trying to get out with his pants falling down, that was so nerve-wracking to watch because I didn't know if Arman was going to get finished or not. Ultimately, the UFC lightweight division has some absolute killers in it. Even going down the rankings, you have Bobby Green, who's an amazing fighter. You have Jalen Turner, Dan Hooker, Rafael Fiziev, who could be former champion, who could be future champion going into the UFC in the next coming years after coming. Mateusz Gamrot, who might not be the most exciting fighter, but who is incredibly skilled. You got veterans like Rafael Dos Santos if he comes back to that division. Ultimately, lightweight is probably the most fun division to watch. And I forgot Michael Chandler, who is fighting Conor McGregor, is probably going to fight Conor McGregor, but his natural weight division is lightweight. But lightweight is probably the most fun division to watch in the UFC because every single fight that's put on is an absolute banger. Thank you guys so much for watching this episode of Fight Season MMA. Please let me know what you think about these ranking videos by leaving a comment down below. I know I usually do UFC breakdowns and different UFC events, but I want to start doing ranking videos to be able to involve the community more and to have more subjection in these videos going along rather than just news and everyone listening. Please leave a like, comment, and subscribe. I appreciate all the support. Let's get to 100 subscribers and 1,000. I appreciate everyone, and if you have a comment or anything to say, I love responding to comments. Like I said, please leave a like and subscribe, and I will see you guys incredibly soon.